Hello. So I was working in the prison today. Long time coming. It's been a while since I've run some classes there because of the whole COVID thing. They're slowly starting to open their doors. The one-way system. You're allowed in, and some of us are allowed out too. I was working with this guy today, and he just he's a bit all over the place really, and he said, "Oh, I'm bipolar. You know, doctors have diagnosed me bipolar, they've got me on all this medication, got me on all these treatment programs. Yeah, they're saying I'm not normal, I have trouble concentrating. You know, they've labelled me ADHD." And I was looking at him, trying to look at him through my psychic eye, let's call it. And as he was saying, "I am this, I am that," I was seeing all these little labels being imprinted into his vital body, into his astral body, into his kind of spiritual body. You know, everything that he was ultimately identifying with was creating some kind of energetic imprint, which, you know, ultimately doesn't really serve us. So anyway, did some work with him today, worked with the drum a little bit, worked with some meditation practice, helped him settle the mind a little bit, helped him give him a few tools to work with in his cell time. And he was quite grateful for that, and which is nice. But I was contemplating what he was saying to me. It's quite interesting that as doctors, as medicine, allopathic, I suppose traditional medicine practitioners, we have this godlike, now I'm not talking personally here because I'm not a doctor, but have this godlike arrogance, I guess, to attempt to normalise somebody against a standard of measure, which, if you're outside a certain bracket or line, creates this alarm bell that says you're not normal. You know, you're not normal, and we need to make you normal to feel more comfortable. I thought, shit, you know, haven't we come a long way? Hasn't the pharmaceutical industry come a long way in dictating ultimately how any soul experiences life? And yes, you can use the word normal, but I prefer to use the word harmonised or balanced. And this guy, fair play to him, you know, he wasn't particularly balanced, and there were reasons for that. We all go through swings of the pendulum, right? Then I thought to myself, God's pretty fucking unbalanced if you think about it. Talk about bipolarity. You go from a very still, centered singularity into this chaotic, entropic maelstrom of fractal fuckduggery, right? Which creates universes and extremes and dualisms and this torsion and tension and ripping apart of positive and negative genders. This fractal soup of polar or polarized experience. So if you were defining if someone was bipolar, then I would say our creator is pretty bipolar, right? And we are part of that, so we're all bipolar. We're all positive and negative. We all have masculine and feminine gender within us. We all have the ability to reach extremes and experience extremes. And again, I was contemplating, because obviously when I work with people, I always try and use them as a little mirror, you know. I don't have a huge circle of friends anymore. I used to, but I don't seem to have that anymore for various reasons. And often, you know, sometimes when you're looking at your own blind spots and trying to dig a little bit deeper into your psyche and your soul and do your shadow work, sometimes you need some mirrors, right? Sometimes you need the universe to bring you people to help you realize yourself, to help you kind of know yourself better. So I always look at my clients at times and just go, what are they teaching me about myself? How have I been very bipolar in my life? And bloody hell, you know, some of the extremes of experience, behaviour that I've been through has created massive swings of an energetic pendulum within me, and obviously outside of me as well, because as within, so without. You know, so we go through these dualisms, we go through these depths of despair, and then these kind of heights of joy. We always want to cling on to the stuff that I suppose in many ways makes us feel better, or maybe even not so much better or ecstatic or orgasmic, but more balanced and more serene. That's where I'm getting to anyway now. You know, it's more kind of, I define joy as serenity now. I define being in a state of balance and peace as more important than having the swings of experience that give you a temporary, you know, adrenaline buzz, no matter which kind of side of the pendulum you're on, but then ultimately feed that energy out somewhere. And I was studying through some meditation practice, really, and through some of my work, you know, where this energy goes when we kind of swing from polarity to polarity. And most of it ultimately ends up back into creation at some level, back into the Divine Mother. And she takes that energy and uses it for something else. And so, you know, we're part of this kind of recycling system. But your energy's precious, you know. Your energy's precious. Your consciousness is precious. And where you unconsciously have pockets of energy and consciousness trapped in certain swings of a pendulum, then more often than not you end up maintaining the momentum of that pendulum and draining yourself of that energy, and actually limiting the amount of consciousness that's free to become more awake, aware, and I guess create higher levels of perception for yourself. So, you know, where does this consciousness go? And I put a little post out on my page earlier today talking about vampires. You know, I like to get a bit dramatic about these things, but ultimately what I found was when you're feeding a pendulum of some sort, you're always ultimately feeding some kind of ego, okay? So it's best given an example, really. So for example, I'll go personal example. In the past, I used to not have much, let's call it self-worth. You know, I was kind of very body conscious, and I used to get into kind of states of anxiety and depression around, you know, the comparisons I used to make of myself against other men and against kind of, you know, societal imagery, which, you know, is an easy trap to fall in. You know, most people have fallen into that. So that was kind of one swing of a pendulum. I felt, you know, quite shameful at times, and that was feeding something, right? That shame, that lack of self-worth in me at that point in time was feeding one end of a pendulum, right? So when I was feeling like that, oh, hello, butterfly. You can see that, almost landed on there. when I was feeling that polarity of the pendulum, when I was sitting in that, it didn't feel very comfortable, you know? It really didn't feel like I wanted to stay there that long, because it was very draining. I felt quite spent, right? And so, what did I do? I kind of tried to swing myself to the other extreme. And so I started going to the gym and training and getting in really heavily into various sports. Basketball, karate, martial arts, boxing, you know. And I used to take these things sometimes to a real extreme. I used to become very obsessive and compulsive about it. And whilst I was training and trying to perfect this view of myself, this imagery, the shame wasn't noticeable anymore. So it's almost like I'd gone from one end of the stick to the other end of the stick. But when you look back on that, when I was feeling more full of endorphins, so more full at that point in time rather than empty, ultimately, yeah, after every session, after every game of basketball, after every karate training camp, after every, you know, fight that I had, I felt spent. I felt spent, but I felt it was almost like a good spent, yeah? It kind of had placated something in me. And I also felt proud of my achievement. This is how much I scored in this game, and this is the belt that I got in karate, and, you know, there's that sense of personal pride, which kind of attempted to negate that hidden shame that I wanted to kind of to hide away. And but with objectivity, when I looked at that, when I looked at the pendulum, looked at the seesaw, every pendulum has a fulcrum, right? What was driving that pendulum was ultimately pride. There's still an ego of pride, okay? And that ego of pride can either manifest as one polarity, shame, or another polarity, overinflated pride, okay? And sense of over-aggrandized self-worth, you know. I am the best sportsman on the planet, you know, and I am this and I am that, and look at me, look at my muscles and all that kind of stuff. And it was interesting because either way, I was giving energy to that pendulum. Either way, I wasn't actually doing the real work. Either way, I wasn't identifying that at that point in time as pride. All I was trying to do was avoid myself, okay? So by looking into that, and maybe if at that point in time I had sat in my shame and actually gone deeper into it and felt the darkness in it, I could have at that point gleaned some more information about the ego of pride, let's call it, that was trying to work its way through me to take my energy. And that ego of pride, in many ways, has plagued me a lot in my life. You know, we have to get honest about ourselves when we're doing this work, and I'm more than happy to give examples of where I've had to battle my own demons, really, before you can kind of, I suppose, at some level help others attempt to battle theirs. But that ego of pride manifests very cleverly. And it always kind of get you around the back door. So you've got to be very careful. You've got to kind of practice radical humility and understand that, for me, you know, anything that you might put your mind to energetically in this universe, A, is always temporary, and B, will never give you a lasting sense of satisfaction. It'll give you a temporary accolade of satisfaction, but after overinflated pride tends to come some kind of fall, because that's how it works, right? We're on a sine wave here, up and down, right? So there's never any truth to it. It's a shell. It's an empty shell. It's a vampire, and it wants to take your blood. It wants to take your energy, and it wants to keep itself sustained through busyness, through activity, through whatever. Okay. that's just one example. That's just one example of how a potential egoic pendulum, because that's how I see egos. That's how I see demons. Okay, you know, you have our inner demons, and we have spirits around us that some are evil and some aren't so evil, right? Just like people, yeah. So these egos, they're like pendulums. I see them like pendulums. I see them like little tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, and they'll always create some kind of problem for you. But on the other hand, they'll always create the solution for you too. And sometimes they gang up. Sometimes they create little strongholds within you. You know, they get their mates together, and so there might be a demon of fear working, which will get its fill. And then there'll be a demon of pride or anger that might latch on to that ego of fear, and create a potential out, all right, or a potential solution around the fear that has been felt. And so there's this kind of, it's almost like this divide and conquer thing going on, where you've got energies creating problems, but also creating a pendulum, or rather showing a potential solution, but it's all part of the same pendulum. And we see that mirrored a lot when we look outside of ourselves in kind of multinational corporations, societal hierarchies and institutions that ultimately feed off an element of some kind of egoic desire, or some kind of ultimate some kind of feeling of lack, i.e. feeling of emptiness. So I was thinking, well, yeah, why do we feel these desires? Why do we feel empty? Or why do we feel too full sometimes? And again, it's almost like these things have got a job, right? They're there to either make you feel really full, or they're there to make you feel really, really, really empty, right? Really empty. And that's their job. They're just either here to make you full or empty. Again, two extremes of a pendulum. But either way, you're feeding something, right? If you're feeling full, then you've fed something within you. If you're feeling empty, you've kind of fed something outside of you, right? And so it's, you know, we have to be hyper vigilant about how we operate and how we give our energy. And a lot of the debates that we're seeing outside of us at the moment, and I enjoy dipping in and out of them occasionally, obviously create these pendulum swings. They create these polarities. And you've got to be really careful how internally, though, you engage, because you can't help but have to make choices in life. All right, you know, you can't be so freaking neutral that you do absolutely nothing. All right, because that's still a choice, right? So you have to make a choice. Sometimes you have to take a side. Sometimes you have to make a decision. Okay, and what's important is not necessarily the decision you make. What's important is how you operate within that pendulum, or how you feel into that darkness, I guess, behind the pendulum, or behind the kind of game of chess that you're being forced to play at some level. You know, are you on the black side or are you on the white side, you know? And I think what's important with these things is to understand that, you know, when you're talking about things like evil spirits or demonic entities or egos, doesn't matter how you define them really, they're not your friend, right? They can be made into allies at some level, but they're there to ultimately create chaos. They're there to create division. They're there to create, from a scientific perspective, entropy. They're there to help the Divine Mother, the universe, the creation, ultimately destroy itself, recycle itself, and then rebirth itself. So they have a divine role to play. And if you understand that, then you can observe those pendulums swinging within you, but not necessarily give them so much energy. You can engage in those pendulums at times and still not give them so much of your energy, because you're not so attached then to the outcomes. And you tend to take a more accepting, sometimes, let's use the word neutral stance of live and let live, and let us all just enjoy the consequences of our choices. Or not enjoy them, whatever the case may be. But either way, you know, we're learning something through the whole process. So, yeah, a bit of a random rambling. Tends to happen when I go for a walk. I haven't done a video for a long time because it's been summer holidays. I've been quite busy with kids' activities and whatnot, and I haven't really felt particularly inspired to be talking about spiritual stuff. But I thought I'd kind of pop on tonight and give an opinion, give a little insight into some of my own personal experience and how I feel about that and how I interpret that. And so yeah, so it's about energy, it's about operating within energetic frameworks, knowing that ultimately, you know, the only way this universe operates is through this spinning spiral of negative and positive polarities trying to unify themselves. So law of attraction, like attracts like. So if you remember the symbol of the Tao in the Tao Te Ching, you've got the two semicircles. They look a little bit like a 6 and a 9, and within each side there's the white side, the light side, that has a little bit of black in it, and the black side which has a little bit of white in it. And those black and white pieces within the larger elements, they represent ultimately the percentage of negativity within the positivity and positivity within negativity, which are always trying to reconcile themselves. Okay? And so when two like polarities try to reconcile themselves through the law of attraction, you create movement, you create some kind of torsion, you create a spin. A very simplistic way of understanding how everything, you know, gets set into motion at some level. You know, you can look at it through octaves, through music, or whatever, which way you want to interpret it, really. But I like that symbol because, you know, when you look deeper into it, you try and place that into your own experience around polarity, around experience, around how you feel about certain people in your life, how you feel energetically. You know, some, you know, there's a repulsion, and then some there's an attraction. You can see then how you're in this constant action, you're in this constant movement, which is why it's so important to ultimately come back to that singularity, into that point of serenity and observation, which observes the outer polarity, but ultimately has its place within the inner still point, the inner ground, being in the world but not of it, being in the outer reaches of this cosmos, being in this outer extremity of the expansion of experience, of polarity, but knowing that within you there is a singularity, there is a trinity that is always going to be pulling you back home and guiding you. And that's comforting to know. But at some level we have to play our part in that too, by one eye out but one eye in, and I think that's important. Anyway, there we are. See you next time.